Welcome back. My name is Carol Rowenbeck, and I'm at Rutgers Law School in Newark. And I have the pleasure of introducing to you someone that you've met several times already this morning. So bear with me, because we'll get a few more of his credentials, although his lengthy bio and many of his publications are listed in the brochure for the conference. So I am introducing Ken Taylor, who is currently a visiting professor at Slipcorn University in Bangkok, where he teaches on the international program in architectural heritage management and tourism and supervises doctoral students. Previously, he was professor of landscape architecture and co-director of the Cultural Heritage Center at the University of Canberra. He has degrees in geography, town planning, and landscape architecture. He has a research interest in cultural landscapes since the mid-1980s, and he has published nationally and internationally on meanings, values, and cultural landscape conservation. He has been a consultant to numerous international organizations, including UNESCO and ICOMOS, to mention a few. I won't go through all his publications, but I always like to point out books when faculty publish them. He has a book on Canberra titled Canberra, City in the Landscape, published in 2006, and a forthcoming work, A Contemporary Guide to Cultural Mapping. And I could talk much longer, but I'm sure you would prefer to hear from our speakers. So I'm happy to turn over the microphone to Ken Taylor.
I'm sorry, I'm back again. I'm going to talk about Georgetown in Penang. Fortunate enough to be been involved in doing some workshops there through a group in Australia called Oz Heritage and working with the Penang Heritage Trust. And I might say at the outset that the approaches that are being taken in Penang, in Georgetown, are in fact really a shining example of a non-government organisation, the Penang Heritage Trust, which is very much the brainchild of Salma Koo, who I once referred to at a workshop as my second wife. She was always telling me what to do. But Salma and the Penang Heritage Trust have really pushed the idea of an historic town as a series of, communities and living communities. And not so much the architecture. It is a good example of what we mean by HUL, the historic urban landscape paradigm. I should also say that, and I know that people have said it, I think the term historic urban landscape is wrong. It doesn't portray what it really is about. It's great idea, pity about the name. I think as Peter Fowler once said about cultural landscapes, great idea, pity about the name. I think urban conservation would have been better. But anyway, let's look at Georgetown and Penang. Georgetown was placed on the World Heritage List in 2008 at the meeting in Quebec. And it had been, as I say, the result of the initiative by Salma Koo and the Penang Heritage Trust since the 1980s. It's twinned with Malacca, and both towns went on the World Heritage List, 2008. And it says here, there are remarkable examples of historic colonial towns in the Straits of Malacca. They demonstrate a succession of historical and cultural influences from their former function as trading ports linking the East and the West. They have a multicultural living heritage originating from the trade routes from Great Britain and Europe through the Middle East. And this is over a 500-year a 500-year period. And these are the trade routes going to the Middle East, India, and then through the Malay archipelago to China. Both towns bear testimony to a living multicultural heritage and tradition of Asia. How do you conserve that? And this is the big question and challenge for Georgetown. Underlying all this, Georgetown is changing. So one of the things that we need to ask, we asked this at a seminar there in March this year at a workshop where it wasn't just experts, but people from the communities were invited, and they came. And one of the things I said to them is that within this overall international paradigm of conserving a place like Georgetown through UNESCO initiatives, what do you think are the acceptable levels of change that can take place, may take place, in your town? It is your town. It's not UNESCO's town. It's not somebody in Paris that owns this. It's yours. So what are your hopes for the future? I regret to say that I'm now told by Salma Koo that some local developers took that as a carte blanche from somebody from Australia to do whatever they wanted in Georgetown, and I'm mortified that what I said has been mistaken. I don't think I misspoke, to use Hillary Clinton's words. So that criterion, it's listed under criterion 2. It's an exceptional example of multicultural trading towns in East and Southeast Asia. I think it's important to understand that this inscription does look at things like multicultural aspects and communities. It's to do with the mercantile exchanges of Malay, Chinese, Indian cultures, and 3 successive European colonial powers for almost 500 years. Both towns show different stages of development and successive changes over time. Criterion 3, living testimony to the multicultural heritage tradition of Asia and European colonial influences, with their tangible and intangible heritage expressed in a variety of religious buildings of different faiths, ethnic quarters, languages, worship, religious festivals, dances, costumes, art, music, food, and daily life. It's now 4 years since it was inscribed, and this aspect is changing and breaking down. As usual, with these places, gentrification is taking place, and the architecturally things may be conserved, but culturally it's changing. So I'll come back to that in a moment. Criterion 4 talks about the unique architecture, culture, and townscape without parallel anywhere in East and South Asia. I think the World Heritage Committee should not have accepted that because it's, in my view, it's untrue. It's an extremely good example of what they're talking about, but it's not the only one. However, that's my point of view. Just to orient ourselves, it is of course on the seafront, and this is one of its important aspects. As you approach Penang, you see Georgetown nestling between these great multi-story developments, almost like being held in a cradle. It's a wonderful example of old and new together, and the vibrancy, again, that you get in these Asian cities. The inscribed area, I mustn't call it the core area, the inscribed area is this in yellow. It includes a number of important civic and cultural buildings, I can't quite, this one in particular here, which I'll show you a slide of in a moment. Bear this one in mind. It's a clock tower of some importance, a 19th century building, and then you have the buffer zone. I would defy anybody, I'll show you a slide in a moment, I'll defy anybody looking down that street to say which is the inscribed area and which is the buffer zone, and I still can't work it out why they drew the boundary down there. Richard Engelhardt, who used to be in the Bangkok office, always said that it's far too big, the inscribed area should have been much smaller. I'm not sure that I agree with him. It also includes an historic fort and a park area. These are some views of it. It's essentially a community of shop houses with a lot of Chinese communities. And the Chinese communities were connected with temples. And they ran like kind of social philanthropy societies. They have a clan temple, and you belong to a clan, and you were looked after within that social grouping. That's breaking down. Some of the temples are now vacated. So that part of the social system is breaking down. There's the Indian area, the Christian area. One of the things traditionally in Georgetown has been the street life and the festivals and the things taking part in the streets. And the Penang Heritage Trust and the World Heritage Office in Penang, in Georgetown, are attempting to maintain these sort of festivals to give some sort of sense of continuity and social sustainability, cultural sustainability to the area. You see, here we are. Obviously, I'm in a multi-story building here looking down, but you can see the areas we're looking at, these shop houses in here and here. I think this is in the buffer zone, there are some large Chinese-style houses standing in their own grounds, which are very gracious and rather lovely. Pressure, of course, to turn these into hotels. The hotel pressure is on, you know, and under the guise from the developers of revitalizing Georgetown. Well, it ain't dead. So why does it need revitalizing? What they're saying is it's revitalization for tourists, because tourists are pouring in here, mainly, again, Asian tourists. The shop houses, see here, now, there's the boundary, and there as well. A bit difficult to understand why the boundary goes down the middle of that road. It doesn't really matter. But I'm not sure, where would you place these little shop houses on your aesthetic value scale? We're not talking about aesthetic values here. Unless you look at aesthetic values as I do, as a social value, not whether something's beautiful or whatever. The last thing you'd say about many of these shop houses is that they are, in fact, particularly visually attractive. But it's the life that goes on in there and the interchange between the people. There are a whole range of shop houses, from some quite grand ones to much more lowly ones. And traditionally, people, undertaking ordinary, everyday work, metalsmiths, people doing woodwork have lived in these areas. They're now leaving because they're being turned into apartments and hotels. One of the interesting parts of Georgetown are the clan jetties. And it's where the Chinese diaspora, where people arrived and they set up their communities on the seafront, and under the fishing and this sort of thing. And they've set up their own celebration. Oh, sorry, this is very. And here, this little sign there, they're celebrating their own. Penang Clan Jetties UNESCO World Heritage Listing. So they're quite pleased with it. I love signs like this, where somebody's just got a pot of paint and a piece of wood and written it on, rather than some official sign that looks as though it's come out of a design manual. There are homestay places along here. In fact, this is one of the phenomena that's occurring throughout Asia, people setting up homestay places. My wife comes with me quite a lot, and I say, I'm going to so-and-so, and they've set up a homestay place, and she says, forget it, brother, I'm not staying in a homestay. It's 4-star for me and nothing less. But it's an important aspect of the catering for Asian tourists. The homestays becoming more and more popular. Hotels. When it was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2008, permission had already been given. Let me just flick past here. There's an aerial view of it. Permission had already been granted for 4 hotels of above 18 stories and up to 30-odd stories in height. 2 along here and 2 in this area. And there's an argument as to whether this was actually revealed fully in the World Heritage nomination, because in the World Heritage nomination there's a limit to the number of stories, the height of the buildings that can be put in there, and it was to be a height of 18 meters, not 18 stories, 18 meters. These 4 hotels, they had permission for anything from 12 to 28 stories. When this became clear, there was the threat of Georgetown going pretty quickly on the World Heritage in danger list. And in fact, there was a mission there in 2009 to review what's happening there. I'll come back to those 28-story, 12 to 28-story developments shortly. But within Georgetown itself, a number of the shop houses, they are changing. There's like artist studios, architect studios. Nearly 20% of the shop houses are empty. 10% of them, nobody knows who they belong to. Families have moved, they've migrated, gone to USA, Australia, Canada, just left the house, and they're standing empty. At one stage, the local mafia moved in and boarded up these empty houses and started swifts having nests in these houses because they were making a heck of a lot of money for bird's nest soup, which comes from the saliva of the swifts when they bind the nest together. And this is expensive stuff, You're looking at maybe $2,000 for one little handful. That's been now closed down because, it smelt rather, and it was encouraging more and more vermin into the area. So that's now been closed down. But and we went into some rather attractive, one-person architects' offices set up in these shop houses. But in other areas, in other parts, they're being turned into hotels. This is one example here. It's rather a grand house in this street of shop houses, but it's being turned into a hotel, which is, if you like, maintaining the architectural integrity and of the place. The architecture is remaining. They're trying to maintain the same sort of paving instead of just introducing brick paving from somewhere else into the area, and it sits quite. I think amicably with in this street and with the other housing. This one is where I stayed there last time, and the shop house is on the front, and what they've done is extend it backwards, because very often these the lots are very long and narrow, and so with this one they're able to push it backwards, and that's the bedroom I was in. So I'm guilty of helping to pay for gentrification, I suppose, because that's where I stayed. This is in the buffer zone. And this is what it looked like previously, and this is what it looks like now. It's got this rather attractive Mediterranean-style courtyards, but it ain't Georgetown. You know, it just doesn't have the feel. It's attractive, it's pleasant, but to me as an expert, well, I suppose I'm an expert. Yeah, I hate that word, but you know what I mean. It doesn't quite fit, but I'm sure that Asian tourists don't see it that way. So this is a great place to stay. One of perhaps the most irritating things for me is that they have. Sorry, it's a little photograph. I know. The whole place is decorated with stuff that they picked up around Asia, and this is one of the big figurines from Angkor. What the heck it's got to do with Georgetown? I'm not quite sure. It looks Asian, and it sure as eggs is Asian. So things are changing. One of the things I said to them, do we, in trying to keep some of these shop houses, do we allow, say, IT offices to take them over, combine them internally, keep the front, but this is facadism in a big way, but it is happening. The problem with doing that is within these shop houses, which are sort of long and narrow, inside them they have the most beautiful courtyards, which are open to the to the sky, and then it rains in, and the water drains away. If you start removing those, you're removing the real feeling and the integrity and authenticity of the place. But if it means maintaining the external part, these are the decisions that they're going to have to make. What are the acceptable levels of change in this area? The next one. So here's an aerial view looking down into Georgetown, the core area here, the buffer zone here. This tower is an aberration from the 1960s, and it kind of blights the view wherever you see it along some of the main streets. It's a shopping centre and tower. These are where the 4 hotels which had pre-World Heritage listing permission to go, and they were, as I say, up to 28 stories. Now you can imagine the impact that would have. And within the whole paradigm, we do talk about physical integrity and visual integrity. But it's not just that for me. It's the impact that these would have on the community values of Georgetown. And I think I referred earlier to one of these buildings along the front. These are some rather grand shop houses from the 19th century, although they're now derelict. There's the clock tower that I mentioned. One of these hotels, I think it's this one here. That's the best I can do with my limited IT skills, but that's where the hotel will come to, and you can see that it's going to clash with that view. So the visual integrity, physical integrity is changing. Again, I pose the question: does it matter? Well, wrap up. Yes, all right. Originally 28 stories, they have now got the developers to agree not to go above 18 meters. So at least we're keeping within the World Heritage guidelines. But also in this area, and without any reference to heritage or the World Heritage Guidelines, the Planning Authority has decided that any block over 50,000 square feet or a next to 5-story development can have multi-rise development of any height that they want. There's going to be no heritage restriction on it. Salma projected what it might look like if we keep on with this untrammeled development. And one of the important aspects about Georgetown is the view along the street to Penang Hill, which is of historic significance. It is, for those, incidentally, it's the first place in the British colonial empire where houses were built, to escape the summer heat. Not India. They started in Georgetown, Penang, and they're trying to maintain views of the hill. I'll leave you with these. Salma asked me some time ago what did I think they should be saying to the planning authority about this idea of hulls and Georgetown. And these are a list of things that I said. Listen to communities, the need to safeguard cultural context, and so on. Can I just mention one thing, please? In Francesco Bandrin's chapter in the book that Jane and I did, he talks about the hull paradigm, and he talks about change, and he said, conclusions, Venice or Varanasi, which do we want? Venice, architecturally conserved, to the last stone. But culturally, it's changed. 60% of the population have left Venice. They can't stand it any longer because of the tourists and the international things. So its values have changed. Varanasi, a hodgepodge of all sorts of architecture, exciting and so on, but its values have been maintained. There are two different kinds of approach to the historic urban landscape paradigm, both of which I think are appropriate. I will stop there.